Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's virtual meeting of the Planning and Development Board. Um, I'd just like to, before we start, remind members that since we last met, two members have left the board, Councillors LeBrun and Caroline Simmons. I'd like to thank them very much for their hard work as members of the board for the year that they were with us, and to welcome Councillors Judy MacDonald and Barry Lees to the board. Members, I'm presuming that it's your wish that we write to Councillors Simmons and LeBrun and thank them for their time with us. If anyone disagrees, please let me know, but otherwise we'll follow up on that.
So moved, Chair.
Thank you. I'd also like to welcome Mr. Clive Tobin to his first meeting. I'm sure you'll all be aware that a little while ago, Mr. Maxey was demoted to Chief Executive. He's still with us tonight, but at some stage in the future, no doubt he'll fly off and do his other duties, and we will have Mr. Tobin with us as a regular attendee. But congratulations, Mr. Maxey, and congratulations, Mr. Tobin. Members, with your forbearance, I'd like to vary two items on the agenda so that planning applications 3 and 4 are switched about, so that we consider the item to do with the Hamshall roundabout south of Marsh Lane, Curdworth, before the item on the Town Council officers, North Street, Atherstone. My reasoning for that is simply that there are a number of members who are not able to take part in that conversation, and it would be simpler for us to deal with everyone in the meeting for the Curdworth application, and then other members can leave for the Atherstone one. Agenda item number 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence or members away on official council business. Mr. Maxim.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. There are two apologies, Councillor Downs and Councillor Dervix, and their substitutes are Councillors Farrell and Osborne.
So, members, I presume you're all content to accept those apologies, and a particular welcome to Councillors Farrell and Osborne for the board. I hope you find it interesting and enjoyable. Agenda item number 2 is disclosure of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Mr. Maxey.
Other than in respect of the last item that you just mentioned, I haven't received any.
Thank you very much. So, members, we now move straight into consideration of the planning on applications to consider tonight. The first one is application number 496 for the proposed wave park at Coleshill Manor. We do have a speaker, Mr. Stephen Price, but Mr. Price, before I call on you, Mr. Brown, would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start, there are clearly two applications here on the agenda, numbers 1 and 2, and I just need to draw members' attention to the fact that the sites are next door to each other and that they share the same access arrangements. And whilst each application will be determined on its own merits, members are reminded that the cumulative impacts are going to be a material consideration in both those applications, and they will see at the end of the reports that I've done, there's a short section on those impacts. Members will have to consider those matters as well when they determine the applications. Both applications will fall under the 2009 direction, and members should be familiar with this. Recently we had the application at the Belfry Hotel which had to be referred off to the Secretary of State. So if members follow the two recommendations, these applications will need to be referred, but the board is entitled to refuse both planning applications without referral. So that members, so it's absolutely clear and transparent, the SURF application is being dealt with first because this was submitted several months before the wall application, and that's the reason for the order in the agenda. So, Mr. Chairman, if I can just introduce two slides. Right. We should be back to normal now in terms of the agenda that we deal with. Right. So this is the application for the surf park. Members will be aware of where this site is from the site inspection from the previous application that was reported to the planning board. The M6 motorway is down here. Codal is well across to the right, and the Birmingham Road follows the line of the cursor to the south. The road that goes up to the Codal Manor Office Park, this is the Codal Office Complex. South Drive comes down through here to the new roundabout. This is the gatehouse into Codal Manor, and the new access will follow this particular route up to the application site itself here for the surfing park. So that members can orientate themselves, the application for the wall, which comes next on the agenda, is here, but they do share the same access arrangements. There are some changes referred to in the committee report since the application came in. Those relate to the access, which members can see now on the screen, and also this particular part of the application site is the line of the outfall from the drainage system. Should the surfing lagoon have to be discharged at any particular time, that water will come down the infrastructure within the road and then through this outfall into the watercourse here and thence to River Cole. That's referred to in the committee report. The second slide shows you the application site itself with the surfing lagoon. The equipment that creates the waves is at this end of the site. The access comes around, as you can see, with the car parking at this end of the site. The building itself is here, this half crescent-shaped building with a monopitch roof. Members will be aware from the committee report there has been a change. A small cafe or cabin, which was originally on the proposals, which is down here, has now been omitted, and there's a small cafe up here. So, Mr. Chairman, if I can come back to looking through the report itself, then clearly the site is in the greenbelt, and members will have to consider whether or not the proposal is appropriate or inappropriate development in the greenbelt. Now, in this particular case, members be aware from the NPPF that developments that are for facilities for outdoor sport and recreation already in the starting block as one of the exceptions to whether the proposal is appropriate or inappropriate development. However, that is conditioned, and the two conditions are that they should preserve openness and not conflict with the purposes of the Greenbelt. As you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, it's my view that while these are definitely facilities for outdoor sport and recreation, they do not meet those two conditions. And the reasons there are outlined in that report. There are spatial reasons, visual reasons, and activity reasons. Therefore, I'm starting from the viewpoint that this particular application is not appropriate development in the Greenbelt. However, for the reasons I've outlined in the report, the actual harm is limited. The report then goes through a number of other harms, and members will be aware when they look at the final planning balance in this, they have to weigh the total harm against the other considerations put forward by the applicant. I'm not intending to go through all the harms, Mr. Chairman, but I do wish to draw attention to two, and these are the two most significant ones. The first one is ecology. Then members will see from the report that there is a net site loss over the whole of the application site. And in order to mitigate against that, members will be familiar with offsetting contributions and offsetting schemes, off-site offsetting schemes. And in this particular case, condition 13 enables a biodiversity offsetting strategy to be agreed in order to ensure that net loss is taken account of. Secondly, the point that's made in the committee report, and again which I referred to earlier when I drew attention to the first slide, this is the discharge. Should the surfing lagoon need to be cleared of water, either in emergency or by design, then that chlorinated water has to go somewhere. On the original application, this was to be discharged into a main sewer, but Severn Trent are no longer agreeable to that particular course of action. So the water here will drain via the infrastructure within the access road, and then it will be discharged into that watercourse, which then flows down into the River Cole. Members saw the position of that outfall on the first slide. That has necessitated a considerable amount of reconsultation with the various agencies. And members will note from the committee report that the Environment Agency, Natural England and the County Ecologist do not object. Those are the three relevant statutory agencies, and I would give great weight, substantial weight, to those particular viewpoints. The Environment Agency will be involved anyway, as is indicated in the report, because a permit will be required from them to discharge that water into that watercourse. They will look at it from a number of points of view, but certainly ecology will be one of the particular areas that they look at. So they will be looking at the ecology issues again. Also, any permit will need to be monitored and reviewed. So therefore, there's an ongoing monitoring and renewal system in that permit system. And members will know from previous other cases that they've had that permitting regime is completely different and separate to planning, and we have no remit within that particular set of legislation. So the short and tall of that, Mr. Chairman, is that, as you can see, ecology harms have been mitigated, or indeed they are very limited. In terms of highways, then Highways England has no objection from the impact on the strategic road network. However, the County Council, as local highway authority, has concerns about the A446 roundabout. That's just in front of where the former police station was in Coleshill. That's an existing problem at that roundabout to do with traffic flows. And that much of the talk and discussion between the parties has been to see what contribution could be made by the applicant to help with the improvements on that particular roundabout. Now, that is the correct way to go about this. As members will know, an applicant should not be required to redress an existing problem. They only have to address what the impact will be from their own proposals. Now, that has been agreed with the County Council and the applicant, and that's the correct procedure to go through. And all that is set out in the Heads of Terms document, which is attached to the committee report, and there's an illustration there too of the kind of works that are being looked at on that particular roundabout. And that sum of money is quite a considerable sum of money. So, Mr. Chairman, on page 314 of the committee report, there's a very short paragraph there which outlines, in my view, what the harms are for this particular development. At the top of page 314, there's the green belt, there's the substantial definitional green belt harm, the limited actual green belt harm, limited landscape and visual harm, less than substantial heritage harm, the limited ecological harm, and negligible harm to residential amenity. Of course, on the other side of the balance, then it's the applicant's considerations. And those follow on page 314 and 315. And in summary, though three are identified, there's the national significance of this, there are the local economic benefits to the borough, and there are then the associated community benefits, which link into the council's leisure strategy, and that's particularly relevant because it relates to the use by the community in schools, not only of the surfing proposal itself, but also the outdoor swimming pool that's proposed as part of the overall application. In total, Mr. Chairman, I consider that those particular considerations carry significant, if not substantial, weight. Members will know that in the final balance, they have to determine whether or not those particular circumstances clearly outweigh all of the harms in order to provide the very special circumstances necessary to grant a planning permission. It's my view that they do, and the reasons for that are outlined in 315 under section E in the report. The recommendation, therefore, Mr. Chairman, is one of minded to support. However, as I said at the beginning, members should consider the cumulative impacts of this along with the wall application which follows. And at the bottom of 315, I've identified three particular areas which I consider the most important in terms of cumulative impacts. That's highways, greenbelt and ecology. And you'll see the reasons there, Mr. Chairman, why I don't think that any of those affect the overall recommendation on this particular planning application. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll finish there. I know that the applicant is one of the speakers, and therefore if members have got questions on how the site is to be managed, or technical questions to do with the actual lagoon and how it's going to be operated, then can I ask, please, that they be presented to the applicant and not to me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Brown. Mr. Stephen Price, welcome to the virtual meeting of the board. Mr. Maxim.
Hello, Mr. Price. Can I confirm you can hear me?
I can, thank you, Steve.
Okay, so you've got 3 minutes. I'll let you know at 2.5, and you can start on your own time.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members, thank you for the opportunity to speak for the proposed development. A venture that I'm certain will bring significant sustained benefits to the borough. Recent engagement has to an extent focused on traffic, drainage and ecology. Through constructive feedback, there are now no objections to the proposal. In response to Greenbelt considerations, your officer's report is clear that the potential harm attaching to the proposed development is limited. The site was selected only after a rigorous analysis of many alternatives, and our design has been specifically tailored to the location. Open water and natural planting will predominate, and our construction approach will meet the highest sustainability standards. We'll deploy UV and particulate filtration to keep chlorine concentrations within the lagoon to an absolute minimum, much less, for instance, than in a public swimming pool, and chlorine concentrations will dissipate completely before any discharge to the River Cole. Turning now to the significant benefits to the local economy and local communities, outcomes which have been widely recognised through our public engagement. The proposed development is aligned with the Council's corporate plan and its leisure facilities strategy. It supports the Council's commitments to enable physical activity, healthy lifestyles and well-being across the borough. Specifically, will improve daytime access to leisure provision, much of which is currently school-based, will work with local schools to offer surfing tuition alongside swimming and life-saving instruction, will provide access to older and less mobile members of the community via our minibus service, and will create an attractive outdoor space for rest and relaxation. The development will provide an economic boost estimated by the West Midlands Combined Authority at £18 to £21 million per annum, and will support and accelerate growth in tourism. 100 sustainable new jobs will be created, and there will be extensive supply chain opportunities locally.
That's 2.5
We will
minutes.
contribute. Thank you, Mr. Maxey. We will contribute financially to the delivery of local road improvements. This contribution also providing leverage for public funding to be accessed in this area. More than ever, this is now a critical time for stimulants to the economy and for health and well-being provision. I passionately believe that the development represents an outstanding opportunity, and I commend the application to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Price. We're now going to invite members of the board to ask you questions. While they're considering that, perhaps if I can go with the first one. I understand the issue over chlorination of the water, and I particularly heard you say that the chlorine levels in the water will dissipate, I think you said, before any discharge into the river. I can see how that could be achieved with a scheduled discharge. How would you achieve that with an emergency discharge?
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Basically, even in an emergency situation, any discharge to the River Cole would still need to be licensed by the Environment Agency. So we would still have to wait until we've got permission from the Environment Agency before we make a discharge. And that permission will both relate to the quality of the water that we discharge and also the flow rate. And the flow rate, of course, will be linked to the volume of water sitting within the River Cole at that point in time. The good news is that chlorine in the lagoon dissipates very, very quickly once chlorine dosing ceases. So as soon as we were aware of an issue, we would stop dosing the lagoon. The concentration of chlorine, as I said, in the lagoon is very small anyway, but that would have to get to a point where it's significantly lower than the concentration in UK drinking water before the Environment Agency would agree to the discharge. Happily, that would happen, Mr. Simpson, within a matter of a few hours of chlorine dosing stopping. And this is because A, the concentrations are low, so dissipation happens quickly, and B, the dissipation is actually accelerated by the wave motion within the lagoon.
Thank you. Members, does anyone else have any questions for our speaker? Councillor Deakin, did you indicate?
It's all right now, thank you.
Thank you. Well, in that case, Mr. Price, thank you very much indeed for your contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. Members, who'd like to start the discussion? Councillor Deakin?
Thank you. I've had a lot of issues come into a decision about this application, and it's been a really difficult one for me personally. I can see many of the arguments for or against this application, but I am inclined to believe that the benefits far outweigh the negatives of this application, and I don't think there's any point in me going over each individual point about this application, but I'm inclined to support it.
Thank you very much. Who would like to speak next? Do we have another speaker? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to support what Councillor Deakin has just said. As a former ward member for Coleshill North, I know how important the Greenbelt is to people of Coleshill. But knowing this area and knowing what the future is going to bring for that corridor in terms of new development in the Solihull boundary and the development of HS2 and the need to invest in our infrastructure, our towns and our high streets, and to create jobs of the future, and to really benefit from the tourism industry that is only going to grow as Coventry becomes City of Culture and as Birmingham hosts the Commonwealth Games. I think this is an opportunity for North Warwickshire. It's an opportunity for Coleshill. It's going to be important that the town interacts with this and potential development next door in terms of the economy, in terms of jobs, and in terms of public transport and access to and from the facility. But if this is done right, then there could be huge advantages for the people of Coleshill and local economy. So I'm supportive of the development.
Thank Thank you very much. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to echo what the two previous speakers have said. I've had some sort of time thinking about this. I'm always a bit worried about building in the green belt. I think we should never sort of do it without a great deal of thought, even though this land is not particularly valuable as a green site, but it is green belt. But I think the benefits certainly outweigh any harm, and I'm happy to move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Phillips. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Phillips' proposal?
Yeah, it's Ray. I'd like to second that proposal.
Thank you very much. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm local county councillor who represents the coastal north and obviously includes the proposed location within my divisional area. One of the things that I'm really interested in is the contribution to ecological offset. And one of the things I think are really important, Chair, is that any sum of money arising from this development, in recognition of the fact that it is in the Greenbelt, and in recognition of the fact that it sits on the River Cole, which is part of a wider project currently being looked at for restoration by partners from Warwickshire Wildlife Trust and also Tame Valley Wetland Partnership, should be spent locally. So if there are greenbelt considerations, and without doubt there are, because this is a land buffer and the greenbelt is about preventing the expansion of urban communities, then I think that if we are talking about any investment in offsetting, we have a duty to make sure that that offset is spent in the community where the development is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Hayfield.
Like Councillor Deakin, I've thought long and hard about this because we've been councillor around Coleshill for a long time. We've fought long and hard to defend the green belt and the Coleshill corridor. That buffer between us and the conurbation, and I know many in Coleshill will feel nervous about an approval for this application, because to what extent it might change the town through sheer numbers of visitor numbers, traffic. They won't all be coming off the motorways and things. Some will be coming through Nuneaton, for example, in that direction, coming through Coleshill. So there will be concern about the impact on this. I take some comfort in the fact that this is a permissible development within the green belt. It's permissible use within the green belt. But I do have this nervousness, which I think many in Coleshill will share, about what it will do to Coleshill and its residents in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayfield. Mr. Brown, Councillor Riley raised the issue of contributions for ecological offset and what have you. Could you just remind members of the sums of money that are involved in the various headings that are available? No. Sorry, members, we're trying to de-Dalek Mr. Brown. We'll be, if you bear with us for a second.
I can't speak again. I'm going to speak. Can you hear me now?
Yes, indeed. That was certainly the planning officers. We never heard him before. But Mr. Brown, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I was saying was that although the applicants and the county ecologists have agreed the level of loss on site from an ecological point of view, they've not actually converted that yet to pounds, shillings and pence. The condition 13, refers to the need for us to prepare that strategy, and that will be based on that loss, and that loss will be converted into, say, to pounds, shillings and pence. The intention here, I think, from the county council's point of view, and certainly from my point of view, would be to follow the advice that Councillor Riley's mentioned there, and that we would like to see this locally located in order to benefit the local area, particularly as there are designated wildlife sites downstream from this particular location. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. So do I take it from that a further report will be presented to a subsequent meeting to outline exactly what the financial sums involved are?
Well, the condition requires details to come to us for approval. So if the board particularly wishes me to report that those details to you, then we can of course do that, Mr. Chairman.
Then in that case, Mr. Brown, I'd formally ask you to bring a report to a further meeting. I think those are important things that should be in the public domain.
That's noted, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor, sorry, do we have any other speakers? Okay, so members, it's been proposed by Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. As you may remember, members, we're going to proceed on voting by having a call vote. That's simply to speed things up and make sure we don't get too delayed by everyone going through the voting process. So I'm going to invite Mr. Maxey to call out your names. The vote will not be recorded in its conventional sense. There'll be no registers who voted unless a member specifically asks for that. But you will be asked to say whether you are for, against, or wish to abstain. Mr. Maxey.
Councillor Bell.
For.
Councillor Tony Clues.
For.
Councillor Deakin.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Councillor David Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Councillor Lees.
For.
Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Mawson.
I meant to receive a further confirmation email of anything, because I do recall it said that I need to...
I can hear some feedback if you can all mute, please.
Does that matter?
For.
Trying to speak. Final call for... Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you. Councillor Osborne.
For.
Councillor Hayden Phillips.
For.
And Councillor Simpson.
For. Oh,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Maxey, even on my maths, that sounds like carried. So, members, thank you very much for that. We now move on to consideration of application number 701 for land adjacent to Coleshill Manor off South Drive, Coleshill. We have Mr. Richard Gamble as the speaker. Mr. Gamble, I'll invite you to speak after Mr. Brown has introduced his report. Mr. Brown, leaving the Dalek behind, if you don't mind.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just need to repeat what I said previously at the beginning of the first item. These two sites sit next door to each other, share the same access arrangements, and therefore cumulative impacts will have to be considered in this particular application as well. And also the 2009 direction also applies to this particular application. So if we can just look through the sites, through the slides.
Slideshow.
Right, move on. Right, so there. Again, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, you can see it's the same sort of area. This is Coleshill Manor, the office complex. The application site includes the access drive up here, and the site itself of the wall is here in this particular area. The application which we've just been considering is within here, due south. The motorway is over here. Again, members will be familiar with this particular application. It has previously been reported to you, and members will have had presentations to them at the pre-application stage. Members have also visited the general area and know the layout of the site. The second slide is a general image of the particular landmark structure that's being proposed. I know that when we presented this last time, Mr. Chairman, there were several such images, but I've just chosen one in this particular case, and members should be familiar with that if they've seen that before. As again, the application is in the Greenbelt, and therefore members should consider whether this is appropriate development or not appropriate development. The same exception applies in this particular case, and is this outdoor sport and recreation? There are no definitions of recreation in the NPPF, but I've indicated in the committee report some dictionary definitions, and also the applicant sees this as a sculpture park, albeit with one big piece of sculpture within it, but it's generally a sculpture park and recreational park. So therefore, in general terms, I think this would fit the particular exception which is referred to in the NPPF. However, as before, that is subject to conditions, which mean that we have to look about impact on openness and on the purposes of including land within the Greenbelt. And I'm afraid in this particular circumstance, you can't disguise the fact that this will have a substantial impact on the openness of the Greenbelt because of its size, sign, and particularly its height. Therefore, I've come to the conclusion that this is not appropriate development in the Greenbelt, and members will be aware that carries substantial harm. Again, looking through the other harms on the harm side of the final planning balance, then clearly there will be visual and landscape harm because of its size. Members may take a different view in terms of its design, but that's something which members can review. There's also going to be an impact on lighting because this particular feature will be lit, and that's referred to in the report. In terms of ecology, then this has a net benefit in view of the amount of trees that are being planted around the site. Members will be aware this is quite, at the present time, just an open field with hedgerow boundaries. There's a substantial amount of new woodland and tree planting being provided, and in the parkland setting, the ecologists have found this to be of net gain, so therefore we aren't in the same situation as we were with the previous application. The highway impacts are considered to be less, but certainly they will have an impact on the stretch of road between the Coleshill Manor roundabout and Coleshill itself. And again, the Highway Authority has asked for a contribution, which has been agreed by the applicant for some improvements to highways and cycling facilities and arrangements along that stretch of road. Again, the County Council has said that is a proportionate response to the application which had hit before it. So in terms of overall harm, Mr. Chairman, at the bottom of page 370, there's a paragraph there which indicates that there is substantial definitional harm, Greenbelt definitional harm, and actual Greenbelt harm, less than substantial heritage harm, limited highway harm, limited harm to residential amenity, and limited degree caused by the artificial lighting. In the final planning balance, then clearly members will have to consider what's on the other side of that balance, and those are the applicant's considerations, which are outlined on page 371 and 372 of the report. These, in summary, are that the applicant considers this will provide an overall regeneration catalyst for the area. much like the other landmark structures in the country, and 2 or 3 have been referred to in the documentation, and others, members will know of others as well. Tourism benefits are being outlined, and also in this particular case, a number of charitable consequences and social housing consequences, which I suspect the applicant will outline in a bit more detail when he speaks to you. Those latter 2 have been developed much further in order to give a particular focus on North Warwickshire, and those are set out in the heads of terms, again, which are attached as appendices to the report. In terms of particularly in terms of the charity and the charitable purposes, their intention there is to set up a community partnership, with the majority of the members of that trust would be through local community representatives, and there will be a local focus for that particular trust. So, Mr. Chairman, as you're aware, and members of the board aware, if this is to be supported, then members have to be satisfied that those circumstances, those considerations put forward by the applicant clearly outweigh the total amount of harm which is I've outlined in the report. And if they do, they will then constitute the very special circumstances in which this particular application could be supported. And at the end of the report, Mr. Chairman, there is the equivalent 2 or 3 paragraphs on cumulative issues. And again, my conclusion there is that those should not prejudice or prevent the recommendation that has been made to you. As I just said, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is one of the speakers that's going to address you, and so therefore any questions really on the actual aspiration or the process that's going to be involved on the under the heads of terms should be directed to him.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members, our speaker is Mr. Richard Gamble. Mr. Gamble, welcome to the meeting.
Hi there.
Mr. Maxey. Mr. Gamble, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
You're not appearing on my screen at the moment, but so you can definitely hear me. Okay, as with the previous speaker, you have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know at 2.5. You can start in your own time.
The Wall of Answered Prayer aims to create a piece of public art which explores the relationship between prayer and hope. The landmark will be open to all to reflect on faith and be inspired by stories of hope contained in each of the 1 million bricks that create the structure. I previously shared with you the strategies we followed to engage members of the community and other stakeholders in its design and realisation. Not only have all technical planning matters been addressed, but we have also successfully demonstrated significant environmental, social and economic benefits. So here they are. Environmental benefits will open up a currently private and inaccessible environment for public benefit. Will include substantial new planting and landscape enhancement, giving a biodiversity gain, and will provide for cycle routes to connect Coles Hill. Economically, like the Angel of the North, will create £1.4 billion of socio and economic impact for Coles Hill and surrounding areas, and create local labour and supply chain opportunities. And with Cornerstone Housing, we'll donate 5% of our annual profits for social housing projects in the borough. Social benefits will create a public open space for recreation and reflection for all, with inclusivity at its heart. Will provide an educational resource for local school visits, and provide a further 5% of our annual profits to be distributed to local charities. Our development will align the Council's green space strategy, sustainable community strategy, and its health and wellbeing strategy. Now, in reaching a view on the greenbelt impacts, I'd urge you to recognise the arch design will give a new perspective on the greenbelt in this location. Development here is fully justified through our compelling, very special circumstances case. It is a unique architectural art project, inherently very special, and the winner of a global RIBA competition. There's no suitable alternative for this development, the alternative site, and our site choice has followed an extensive and rigorous assessment of alternatives. And we've demonstrated the significant economic, social, and environmental benefits. This project is globally unique. It's crowdfunded, crowdsourced, and 1 million people will come together to crowd create this incredible piece of art with their stories full of hope. What we're
That's
doing,
2.5 minutes.
what we're doing is historic, and I hope that from today we can make this history in Coleshill together, working in partnership to build a landmark of hope for the well-being of the locality and the benefit of the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gamble. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Whilst you're thinking of them, I have a question, Mr. Gamble. This sculpture, or if that's the right phrase, and so if it's not, is clearly going to be visible from a distance. Given that it'll be lit certainly at night, and given its height, how far do you anticipate people will be able to see the sculpture from, bearing in mind that there are hills on at least two aspects to the site?
Yeah, I think about 3 miles away, something of that nature. We'll see maybe the tip of the arch.
Thank you. And my second question is, you mentioned a substantial amount of planting. I know we talked about it in our previous meeting, but could you just remind us how many trees it is proposed to be planted on the site?
You know that number? I don't know the number. The whole the footage we've taken up of the acreage is limited, and the rest of the site will then be planting. So we'll be planting trees all around the perimeter, but we're creating a garden because we want to create this sort of place of space. So there'll be vast amounts of plants and different going to be placed. Sorry if I'm a bit vague. I don't have the exact number to hand.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Riley, you indicated you'd like to ask a question. Or was it a question
Thank
you
you,
want to
Chair.
speak later?
No, Chair, it's a question for Mr. Gamble, if you don't mind. One of the things that Mr. Brown has said in his report is about the concept of openness of the green belt, and also about recreation, and recognising that recreation is defined within national planning policy framework as an exception together with sporting opportunities. I wonder whether Mr. Gamble has a view on whether this site is a recreational site.
Well, one of the things we've done in our planning of this is to make sure that we'll have on-site security, but we're not fencing it off. We want to make sure that anybody can walk on this site at any time as part of their recreation. And it was interesting in the public consultation the amount of Coleshill people of Coleshill who came and said they would definitely come and had it to part of their walk, which was really encouraging. So, we are sort of in line with the mental well-being strategy. We are trying to create a space where people can walk, where they can relax, where they can think. And we're trying to, if you like, create an antidote to the busyness of life and give people the space to think and reflect. I don't know whether that falls within recreation, but I would say so.
Thank you very much. Members, does anyone else have any questions? In which case, Mr. Gamble, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So, members, we now move on to consideration of the application. Who would like to start the debate? Councillor Deakin.
Thank you. So I've had some trouble again with this application because I think, and I also learned a lot about when we talk about the green belt, we often talk about protecting the green belt, but you can protect the green belt in so many other ways, and that doesn't have to mean that you don't build on green belt in order to protect it. With that in mind, I am inclined to support this application as well, even when considering the accumulative impact of both applications, the one before and this one as well. it's something completely different to Coleshill. It's something that we don't really have, and to be fair, many areas don't really have sites like this. So, with that in mind, it would be something that's quite exciting for both the residents that live in Coleshill, but also further afield, and would hopefully bring great benefit to our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deacon. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. When I first heard about this, a bit like Councillor Deacon just said, you have concerns about building in the Greenbelt, and again, being an area where I grew up, I know it extremely well. And I think Councillor Deacon's right that we're talking about how we protect the Greenbelt, and that's clearly part of national and local policy. But at the moment, this is a piece of land that is inaccessible to the public and offers very few benefits to the residents of Coleshill. This application, I think, on balance, is something that North Warwickshire Borough Council and Coleshill should be proud to be home to. There are significant economic benefits to this, not only in terms of the construction of the site, but in terms of tourism and in terms of the links that potentially can be made between Coleshill High Street and this site itself. I think there are significant environmental impacts for this as well. It opens up a huge chunk of land to become accessible to people of Coleshill, but also obviously for tourists and people of the wider North Warwickshire area. So I think, yes, there will be some objections, but having read the report, I think actually the objections from the members of the public are quite limited. I think I've seen more objections for small housing estates in the town over this, which is quite a large scale development. So I'm supportive of this, and I think North Warwickshire needs to be proud of this and the previous application and take them really to their heart and work with them, both developers, both sites, to make sure this is something that continues to benefit North Warwickshire's economy and the people of Coleshill and North Warwickshire for years to come.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. I totally support everything that Councillor Deacon and Councillor Farrell have said. I had a couple of issues. One of the interesting things that the maps in the pack and that have been displayed tonight don't show is the route of HS2. Now, HS2 will run within 500 yards of this site, and within half a mile will be the highest built structure for HS2 anywhere in the country. So HS2, in terms of the openness of the Greenbelt debate, will knock this development, believe it or not, into a cop nap, because the HS2 line will cross the M42, which members will know is on an embankment, and it will not only cross it at Waterorton, but it will cross it on two other areas, and it will also cross the M6. So if we are considering this application in terms of a question of openness, then we really should be taking into account the significance of the HS2 developed structures which will be built within the coming 8 years. The second point that I'd make, Chair, is around this issue about the recreation, and I would ask board members to seriously consider what Mr. Gamble has said about the openness of the site and about the public accessibility. We do know that recreation is one of the exceptions to the Greenbelt. It is nationally considered a very special circumstance. And from everything that I have heard Mr. Gamble say at the presentations, both to Coleshill Town Council and to North Warwickshire Borough Council, his offer about public access to the site is a genuine one. At the moment, this land is not publicly accessible other than through the marked footpaths that run along there. And actually, if we are talking about health and well-being in gender, if we are talking about spiritual and mental well-being for communities, then I think the access to this site is absolutely fantastic, and it should be considered as a positive by this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to agree with the other speakers on this. I did find it challenging to consider this application. However, I think what swayed it for me was the real innovative, unique nature, indeed, of this application. And I agree with Councillor Farrell, it's something we should be proud of, that it should come to our area. And like all three speakers, what really swayed it for me was, at the moment we've got a private piece of land. This opens it up to public access, gives people more green space, an opportunity to reflect, think, etc. And I think it's a great opportunity. And as far as the structure being high is concerned, I am sure this will develop into an iconic landmark again, of which we can be proud. So I am very much inclined to support this, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Hayfield?
Others, I struggled with this. My initial reaction was no. And I started to question myself on this and listen to the views of others. We can't prevent change. We can try and control change. This will be a landmark for good and for bad. It will be visible from some distances. But as Councillor Wiley says, with high speed 2, maybe not quite so much. I'm listening to what others say before I finally make up my mind what I'm going to do in terms of voting on this.
Thank you, Councillor Hayfield. Councillor MacDonald? You're still on mute, Councillor MacDonald.
So sorry, you can hear me now, yes?
I can.
Thank you. Really, I'm echoing Councillor Bell and Hayfield's comments. At first, I didn't think I would support this, but I fully appreciate that this development will address both physical and mental health opportunities, and will certainly raise the profile of the area, give us public access that we haven't got at the minute. So I feel I'm going to support this application and wish it every luck.
Thanks very much, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Parsons? And you're still on mute, Councillor Parsons.
I'm just sorting myself out. I think I very much like to support this application. I think together with the previous application, what we're actually getting here is we're turning a corner of what is a fairly nondescript bit of land, having been on site visit, into something which is going to be really quite significant for the area. And I think it is going to produce a real character feature for the area, a unique character, which is important. I mean, Councillor Riley has very correctly mentioned HS2, which may bring a lot of things to the area, but it's not going to bring character, and it's not going to bring anything, any unique quality at all. And in that sense, I think both of these developments deserve support, because I think they will bring a unique quality to our part of NorthWarks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Does anybody else have any other comments they'd like to make? Mr. Brown, I do have a question for you, I'm afraid. The previous application made a substantial contribution in view of the likely traffic that will be generated. Personally, I'm having difficulty in assessing the potential volumes of traffic here. I know that the view is that quite a volume of traffic will come by minibuses and public transport and the like, but I'm struggling to understand how much traffic will be generated. In the appendix, it talks about a contribution requested from the Highway Authority of £25,000. What do we do if the paper infallibility of county highways has failed them, and they got it wrong, and substantial traffic is generated, and highway improvements are required, aside from the current limited contribution to footpaths and cycleways?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This particular condition was agreed between the applicant and the County Council, and also the two sets of traffic consultants, both for the wall application and for the surf application. Quite a lot of time was spent discussing and negotiating what impact each development would have on the capacity of the local highway network. The County Council considers this will have less of an impact than the surfing application, but what is particularly important in this application, as has been expressed by several speakers, members, and also Mr. Gamble, is the importance of connecting this site to Coleshill. And therefore this particular contribution goes towards cycle and pedestrian improvements along Birmingham Road between Coleshill and the site, and not on the roundabout. Now that's a call which the County Council has made in terms of the impacts on that particular roundabout and the figures and the traffic modelling that they have done. I would give substantial weight to that because it is again the statutory highway authority which has actually agreed that, and the applicants, both applicants, have agreed that set of circumstances as well.
Okay, thank you. But could you give us a view as to the likely traffic that's going to be generated and how the system will accommodate it? I understand that all the experts are telling me that I should agree with them, which of course is not unusual.
I haven't got the figures in front of me, Mr. Chairman, but in this particular case, the applicant is saying that the traffic generated will be spread throughout the day, but particularly on daytime hours, and it's not going to have the peaks or troughs that a particular residential development or an industrial development would have, and it would be unlike the surfing application as well. What they're saying is that this traffic generated here will be less than the surfing application. More people are likely to travel as in groups, and that's why there's quite a substantial amount of coach parking allowed on the particular application.
I'm sorry to press you, Mr. Brown, but the next question is inevitable. Are we saying, therefore, that there will not be a material amount of traffic generated in the peaks by whatever is going to happen from this application in association with the other uses that are being consented tonight and elsewhere?
That is the view, Mr. Chairman, of the County Council and Highways England. They've been fully involved, as I said, with both sets of applicants. They've looked at all committed and allocated developments in the vicinity and in the area, and this is their considered view on the impact and of the traffic generated by both respective applications.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Do any members have any other questions or comments? Or indeed, does anyone wish to make a proposal as to the granting of consent? I do need someone to propose.
I'll move that we give consent, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
And I'm happy to second that proposal.
Thank you very much. So it's been proposed and seconded for consent. As with the previous application, we'll have a called out vote. Mr. Maxey?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Bell.
4.
Councillor Tony Clues.
4.
Councillor Deakin.
4.
Councillor Farrell.
4.
Councillor Hayfield.
4.
Councillor Humphreys.
4.
Councillor Jarvis.
4.
Councillor Lees.
4.
Councillor MacDonald.
4.
Councillor Mawson.
4.
Councillor Moss.
4.
Councillor Osborne.
4.
Councillor Parsons.
4.
Councillor Hayden Phillips.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
Abstain. And again, my infallible maths tells me that's carried, so planning permission is granted, subject to the consent of the Secretary of State. Members, we now move on to application number 295 for land to the west of Hams Hall roundabout and south of Marsh Lane, Curdworth. We have two speakers here, the first of which is Mr. Steve Harley. Mr. Harley, before we invite you to speak, Mr. Brown will introduce the report. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can just move the slides forward, which aren't working at the moment, but right, we're there. Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members may be familiar with this site from some of the presentations that have already been given, but you can see the location of the two parcels which are referred to in the committee report. The motorway are on the left-hand side, as you've clearly shown there, and Curdworth is further to the left. The roundabout there that you can see on the 446 is the roundabout that runs into Hams Hall with Faraday Avenue on its right-hand side. And you can see that there are two parcels of land, one to the north and one to the south, the larger one being to the north. Then just moving on, this is the illustrative layout which has been suggested. This is not part of the application. The application is an outline, so we're only looking at the principle of establishing an HGV park on the red land, or the areas bounded by the red lines. As you can see here, the northern part of the site would be the lorry park, together with the fuel areas, and you can see that on that particular slide. The smaller site to the south of Marsh Lane would be developed as what is called in the application as an ecological or biodiversity enhancement area. In other words, substantial planting, grass meadows, and that type of thing. Also on the proposal, on the plan there, you can see the proposed changes to the highway arrangements, particularly the realignment of the access of Marsh Lane onto the Faraday Avenue roundabout, which you can see there has been changed, and also the roundabout junction into the northern part of the site, which has been particularly designed to prevent HGVs from turning right as they come out of the site, such that they go through Curdworth. That's been agreed with the County Council as the most appropriate engineering solution for that particular issue. As I can say, Mr. Chairman, the application is just been received. The report is the normal introductory report that I give to you, saying here it is, and what the documentation is that has been submitted with the application. I've also outlined the relevant development plan policies, and the main issue here, Mr. Chairman, will be, as in the previous two applications, first of all, to establish whether this is appropriate or not appropriate development in the green belt, and then to undertake that sequence that we've looked at in the previous two applications, of first establishing the total harms, and then looking at the considerations put forward by the applicant to see if they clearly outweigh those harms to warrant the very special circumstances needed for the grant of planning permission. I wouldn't anticipate, Mr. Chairman, that this particular application is likely to come back for determination until the autumn, given the scale of the application and the consultation process that has to be gone through.
Thanks very much, Mr. Brown. Mr. Harley, welcome very much to the meeting. Mr. Maxey.
Hello, Mr. Harley, can you hear me?
I can, Mr. Maxey, thank you.
Okay, as you'll have gathered by now, you've got 3 minutes, and I'll let you know at 2.5. You can start in your own time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Having undertaken a member briefing last year, I'm pleased to be offered the chance to speak to members at this early stage in the life of our planning application. We are still awaiting comments from a number of statutory consultees, and I don't, as I'm sure members of the committee don't, want to preempt those comments. However, we've had recent very positive discussions with the Local Enterprise Partnership and with the Road Haulage Association about the proposals, and we look forward to further input from consultees in the coming weeks. Our application responds to a number of local and national issues and objectives and would deliver a range of benefits. The local issues and challenges are well documented including a range of road safety as well as welfare and amenity issues in the local area, with HGVs often parked inappropriately and in areas with no proper facilities. This can and does result in antisocial behaviour, as well as drivers and their vehicles being regular targets of crime, which is an alarmingly common occurrence actually. These problems are a symptom of a significant shortage of defined, purpose-built HGV truck stop facilities. This shortage of facilities and the problems caused is understood nationally by government. A report by the Department for Transport in 2017 identified the Hams Hall to Dordon Birch Coppice area as one of only 7 national parking shortage hotspot areas where the challenges mean action is required. National planning policy contained in the NPPF, updated in 2019, highlights the importance of providing adequate overnight lorry parking facilities, taking into account local shortages. The application site is the closest opportunity to provide a new HGV truck stop to serve Hams Hall, which is the main origin and destination of HGV movements in the area. It would provide a safe, secure and high quality environment for vehicles and drivers to park and rest or to wait ahead of their delivery or collection slots at Hams Hall. It would reduce the need for the often inconvenient and dangerous fly parking issues that are seen locally, which are predicted to worsen without action. Distribution and logistics is a key sector for the local and wider Midlands economy. Such facilities as that proposed form part of the supporting infrastructure needed to enable its continued growth and success in a sustainable way. But beyond the broader economic context, at the heart of these proposals are a group of recognised essential workers that we've all been clapping on a Thursday through the COVID crisis, those being HGV drivers involved in essential economic supply chains, who need safe, healthy places to park and rest with proper facilities. Such facilities mean they can do so without fear of crime and where they can eat a proper meal and sleep safely. So in summary, thank you. So in summary, this is a positive, proactive response to both local and national issues. It relates to economic activity and community amenity and safety, including that of essential workers in a key economic sector. We look forward to working constructively with the Council and consultees over the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harley. We now move on to members' questions. Does anyone have any questions for our speaker? I can't see that anyone has indicated, so Mr. Harley, thank you very much indeed for your contribution. Members, we now move on to our second speaker on this item, Mr. Richard Habgood. Mr. Habgood, welcome to the meeting. Mr. Maxey.
Mr. Habgood, can you hear me? Mr. Habgood, can you hear me? I can't hear you.
You're still on mute, Mr. Habgood. Welcome, Mr. Habgood. Mr. Maxey.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Habgood. I'll let you know at 2.5 minutes. You can start in your own time.
Right. Thank you. Firstly, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board, I ask you not to be under any illusion that this outline application is submitted with the approval or blessing of Curdworth Parish Council. In fact, in all my experiences, never have I seen the residents of Curdworth so enraged by this truck stop application, and that daily I and my colleagues field many a question about the proposer's true intent behind this application that will forever erode greenbelt land without sufficient reason. As a council, we will be formally objecting to this application on several issues of believed greenbelt harm. For now, I will name just 2 examples of such harm. We consider that this proposal is inappropriate, as there will be below and above ground structures that create permanent installations such as buildings, below ground drainage, fuel tanks and other services, let alone highway alterations and internal roads and vehicle parking areas and other hard standings that will create a legacy ripe for any future change of use considerations should this proposal fail in a commercial sense. In addition, we know with absolute certainty that this proposal, including the major Marsh Lane highway works, will forever destroy the current visual impact of this land and the only, yes, the only single access and egress road into or from the village of Curdworth from a south and eastern direction. But this is not all. As we will challenge on traffic security and other environmental issues of concern, notwithstanding the proposer's reasoning for this chosen location, despite the lead suggestion and inferred recommendation within the ACOM National Survey Lorry Parking Report of 2017, carried out on behalf of and published by the Department of Transport. Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board, I am here to observe and to inform you about the anger that prevails. Be under no illusion that our formal objection will focus on this development sited to the north and south of a remodelled Marsh Lane, located entirely within Greenbelt land. I thank you for this opportunity for me to speak, and I welcome the recommendation within the papers before you, inviting you to visit this site to see for yourselves the initial stated concerns of ours and more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howgood. Members, does anyone have any questions for our speaker? In which case, as there are no questions, Mr. Howgood, thank you very much for your participation. Members, we now move on to consideration of the item, and I just take the opportunity to remind you that this is not an application for determination, merely for your initial notification and to call for an informal site visit. Would anyone like to speak? Councillor Moss.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You know, I look with a certain amount of horror at Hams Hall. All the lorries and cars parked around the roads there. And I think, why did we not leave enough space for those vehicles when we first designed it? Was the ratio of built sheds, call them sheds for lack of a better, easier term, to the parking space around them, was it laid down nationally, or did we grant it? Or, and it is possible, sometimes drivers prefer not to use internal car parking space. I spoke to a gentleman at Piccadilly once who was parked outside. I vaguely knew him. And I said, why don't you use the car parking space inside? He said, a lot of us don't. He said, we don't like the security people rummaging through our cars when we come out. I suppose that's the point. But you know, we're eating up green belt at a phenomenal rate. I mean, let's not forget Hams Hall, 1,000 acres. I can always remember it as that. I normally think in hectares. 1,000 acres. We took that out the green belt, and of course the great subtractor from our green belt is HS2, over which we've got no control, as you know. I wonder if somebody can explain to me why there's so much parking on the roads around Hams Hall initially, at present, I should say.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Just a couple of points. I think the council didn't grant planning permission, as I recall. It was granted on appeal by the Secretary of State. And secondly, I'm not aware that this is an application to take the land out of the Greenbelt, merely to develop land within the Greenbelt. Mr. Brown, do you have anything else to add?
No, Mr. Chairman, you're correct on both points.
Councillor Parsons?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this is not a determination, as you have pointed out. But I think there are real problems with parking of lorries in our whole area, and there is clearly a need for something to be done properly for this, to provide proper welfare facilities for drivers, and to actually take the burden of this problem away from local communities that are seeing quite a lot of it in various places. I'm not actually sure yet whether this is the place for it, but it seems to me that a site visit and look at this place deserves consideration. And certainly what we have got, as Councillor Moss has pointed out, is a problem of lorry and car parking around some of our large industrial estates. And that's a problem that's got to be addressed properly at some point, I believe. So I think it is worth at least a look. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. Just a really quick point is I heard what the speaker from Curdworth has said in terms of the impact on Curdworth. I don't intend to sit on planning board that often over the coming months and year. I'm just here as a substitute, but the last time I was on planning board, I think, was the discussion around the expansion of HGV parking at Cawley services. And at that meeting, I made the point that the parking of HGVs on residential roads and industrial estates around North Warwickshire was a growing issue for local people. And I supported then the extension of Cawley services. This council, wrongly in my opinion, refused that application, and the Secretary of State approved it on appeal. And I think the council should be mindful and this board should be mindful when it goes forward with this, that of course we want to try and mitigate the impacts of this site and any potential site on residents that might neighbour it, but we should also be mindful of the residents that have to neighbour tens of HGV vehicles, particularly around that area, around Coleshill North and Coleshill Industrial Estate, on an almost daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to echo what Councillor Farrell said. I mean, as someone who lives in, suffers in our ward from a large amount of lorries parked in different places, and especially with the Kingsbury link being overrun sometimes. I mean, it's almost like an open sewer in places on that site, with people parked up and lorry drivers parked in the lay-bys around here. This, like I said, this may not be the right place to have it, but certainly we've been lobbying for a long time for something like this, and I think we need to sort of give it proper consideration. There's arguments in all the villages for saying, "Oh no, not here," but "Oh no, not here, please," with the amount of parking we have. So I'm happy to move the recommendation for a site visit, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Mawson. You're still on mute, Councillor Mawson.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. I've got deep sympathy with the gentleman from Curdworth. As again, I'm talking about Birch Coppice when it first started, was all in favour of doing it. We could see the benefit from it. But since then, it's got a nightmare, the A5 is from there, and with lorries that's coming on and out. And I feel very sorry for the people that's living along there and would like some relief from it as well. But having a lorry park somewhere should do it, because they can be directed to it. And that would be a great benefit to everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Mawson. Would anybody else like to speak? The proposal for a site visit has been made by Councillor Phillips. Can I see a seconder?
I'll second it.
I'll second.
Thank you. So again, you know the drill now. Mr. Maxey will call out your name. Mr. Maxey.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
4.
Councillor Tony Clues.
4.
Councillor Deakin. I know Councillor Deakin was having connection problems. I'll come back to him. Councillor Farrell.
4.
Councillor Hayfield.
4.
Councillor Humphreys.
4.
Councillor Jarvis.
4.
Councillor Lees.
4.
Councillor MacDonald.
4.
Councillor Mawson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Moss.
4.
Councillor Osborne.
4.
Councillor Parsons.
4.
Councillor Hayden Phillips.
4.
And Councillor Simpson. 4. I'll just try Councillor Deakin again.
Hello. Yeah, sorry, I'm here now. 4.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So, yet again, my maths, I'm sure, will be corrected, but I think that was in favour. So, we've all agreed to go and have an informal site visit. Members, I'm not sure when the next board meeting will be held, or indeed when that this item will come back to us. But please, if you could make every effort to attend the site yourselves and see it. If you need any information in advance of that, please don't hesitate to contact Mr. Brown. We now move on to our final application for this evening, number 56, which is the Town Council offices, North Street, Atherstone. Sarah Bishop has indicated that she would like to speak. Before we do that, Ms. Bishop, Mr. Brown, would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you, Mr.
I'll withdraw from the meeting now, Chair. It's right.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fowle. Sorry, Councillor
Jarvis.
Do we have any? Are any other members withdrawing from the meeting? Councillor Clues? Okay, Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just run through the two?
Councillor Jarvis is still there. He's gone now. Oh.
He's gone.
He's gone now. Yeah, just
Okay. Can I just run through the plans then, Mr. Chairman? Members should be familiar with the site in Atherstone. Long Street is to the bottom left in this particular plan. You can see the marketplace to the sort of northwest, if you see what I mean. North Street is there, and the red dot there is the site of the current town council offices. And then the application is to demolish the single-storey pitch roof building and erect a two-storey development. The elevations and floor plans are there, as you can see. The application is in front of you because of the objection that's been received from the County Council. And under the scheme of delegation,
Can we all mute? Can we all mute, please? Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Under the scheme of delegation, as you'll be aware, if the recommendation is contrary to a consultation response from the statutory authority, then we have to report the matter to the planning board, and that's the reason why it's in front of you. Can I just, before I look at the highway authority objection, can I just look at the other couple of the other matters which have been raised in the representations that have been received? Firstly, on the heritage issue, the report outlines the statutory duty of the authority, both in respect of conservation areas and listed buildings, and a significant analysis of that is undertaken on pages 3119 and 3120. There's no objection to the demolition as a consequence, and the issue here is the fact that it is two-storey, whereas the current building is for single-storey. However, it's at the North Street frontage, and therefore it's the far end of all the burgage plots that run from North Street and into Long Street, and therefore that particular urban grain, or that historic heritage grain, will not be lost. And secondly, the application doesn't increase the footprint of the site. It does go up. I appreciate that. But on the other hand, one of the more important issues here is the open views from Ratcliffe Street will still be across open land towards the back of the rear elevations in the Market Square. The copper beech tree that's there will still be very much visible, even with the two-storey development here. So what we're saying from a heritage point of view, there's no objection in principle to demolition, and there's no objection in principle to two-storey development, as it will not adversely impact the heritage assets and significance of this particular area. There's been quite a discussion, Mr. Chairman, about alternative sites, and why couldn't this particular proposal be elsewhere in the town? Every member on the planning board will be aware that each application is determined on its own merits, and therefore the planning merits of this particular application have to be looked at by the board. In respect of the alternative sites, then the reasons why an alternative site has not been proposed is not a matter for this board, and neither are the pros and cons of those alternative sites. Secondly, I agree that the site is not in the defined town centre, but the site has a lawful office use, and this is a redevelopment within that lawful office use. So there's no objection in principle to this particular development from that point of view. In terms of the parking issue, then the Highway Authority has raised this, and clearly this is of weight, but the site already functions without car parking. There's a lawful use. The current the current occupiers make use of nearby car parks, and the fact that we're recommending approval is consistent with other developments in the town, particularly residential developments in the town, where members will be aware that there's been no on-site car parking approved, and that's in the town centre itself. Also, as you can see from the plan, Mr. Chairman, there's no space at all for car parking. In other words, there's no material worsening in the situation, and that's the reason why we're going against the recommendation of the County Council. In terms of its design, we think it is appropriate, and I know there's been a lot of representations made about the DDA requirements. If Mr. Chairman, the board is satisfied with the principle of this development, then there is a condition attached, condition 5, which relates to looking at DDA requirements. So therefore, in fact, we can reserve those for a later consideration. Also, of course, if planning permission is granted, the applicant will also need a building regulation approval. The building regulations will certainly look at DDA requirements, and it may require alteration. The proposals you see in front of you may require alteration. If that happens, then of course the applicant can come back in with the application to vary the proposals in order to meet those DDA requirements. But the majority of those DDA requirements are internal and not external. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Members, we now move to our speaker. I'd just like to welcome Sarah Bishop to the meeting. Mr. Maxey.
Thank you. Councillor Bishop, there is quite a lot of noise in your background, I think.
Sorry, I'm not sure why.
Are you printing?
No, nothing is working in my vicinity. Just bear with me a second.
It might not be you, but it coincided with your mute. Could everybody else just make sure that they're muted?
Right, I'm ready.
It's still there, but we'll try. Carry on, and I'll let you know at 2.5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Is this new civic building fit for Atherstone in the 21st century? No. Firstly, it doesn't comply with Building Regs 2010, and it's not DDA compliant. Outside, there's no space to leave mobility scooters, cycles, buggies, of visiting members of the public, no space for storage of wheelie bins. If left on the pavement, such items will be hazardous to pedestrians and other road users. And as said, no on-site parking facility. Cars parked outside obscure motorist view of vehicles using the adjoining commercial premises access. This is a road safety issue already raised by the Highways Authority. The building entrance opens immediately onto a narrow pavement. Passing others and accessing the entrance will be difficult for wheelchair mobility scooter users, and they may block the pavement whilst trying to gain access to the building. Inside, the ground floor corridor is too narrow to comply with Section 3. There's no reception, waiting, seating area on the ground floor for those unable to go upstairs to the clerk's office. There's no provision of a suitable lifting device to give access to upstairs. There are no kitchen facilities provided downstairs, adversely affecting both visitors as well as those who may work there in the future. The size of the meeting room is inadequate. A full complement of councillors and clerks leaves little space for the public to attend council meetings. The existing building was used exclusively for council business. The new meeting room will be available for hire to community groups and others and represent a change of use. Greater numbers of people going in and out of the building at various times of day is intensification and will contribute to and exacerbate potential road hazards already identified by the Highways Authority. The application should be refused because it fails to meet building regulations, it's not DDA compliant, its location, limited external space, accessibility issues and lack of parking pose potential road safety hazards. Intensification of use increases road safety concerns and for a new build, civic building, it's just not fit for purpose. It does not meet the present or future needs of the growing population of Atherstone, and it's right to hold its council to account in an appropriately sized, inclusive public meeting space. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Councillor Powell.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah, for that really passionate and thorough response to this application. The thing that interests me from what you said was that the Town Council, Atherstone Town Council, expects to rent this building out to other organisations as a source of income and as a facility. That, of course, would be a very different use to that which it has currently and has had previously, and would have an impact on the number of users and cars. Can you just expand a little bit on what the Town Council have discussed in terms of it being used by the public?
Apart from a very cursory mention at a Town Council meeting, this has not been explored thoroughly. They really do need to put together a business case in order to demonstrate that that's required anyway, but they anticipate that that would be a possibility to hire this facility out to, say, not only community groups, but perhaps commercial interests who might need a training venue with online data projection facilities. And obviously that's going to create more need for parking in the town. It's going to create more footfall along that very narrow pathway into the building. And obviously during daytime hours, where normally the council meetings are held in the evening, when there is not such a demand on the parking space outside the council offices.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, members? In which case, thank you very much. Members, we now move on to consideration of the application. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Fowle, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I've got quite a few things that concern me about this application. First and foremost, it seems to me that we have what is effectively a half-completed application in front of us. It's an application that doesn't comply with the Disability Discrimination Act, and the Council's response to that is, don't worry, we'll deal with that by condition. Whereas actually, I think making this DDA compliant and accessible on the first floor is a very material change to the design, and potentially makes the building size unviable, particularly if you do have to put kitchen facilities downstairs and a lift to access the first floor. But there are a number of things that concern me with the report itself. Firstly, it says that the building is on its existing footprint. And actually what we have is a building that is significantly bigger in terms of the internal space that is currently on that site, because the current open yard is not an internal part of the existing building, but will be built on by these proposals. Secondly, the report talks about how the building reflects the historic appearance of much of the recent development that's been built in the conservation area. I think that's a very difficult statement to make, given the very basic drawings that we have seen, hand sketched black and white drawings as to what this building may look like in the future. So I think we've got to be uncertain about that. And again, there are conditions that relate to how the building should look. But while we are considering this application without that detail, on top of no detail about DDA compliance, is concerning. There are a number of representations made, including by Addison Civic Society, about the building's style, design and materials and how imprecise that information is. But there's also clear concern with the public around DDA compliance and the provision of space for things like mobility scooters and prams. If this is a building that is going to be accessible to the people of Addison, whether it's used for the proposed usage of Addison Town Council or any future use, I would expect this council would want to see a DDA compliant building. And there's also a section in the representations that there's been a lack of consultation with the public, and having looked at the application online, I'm not clear where any pre-application consultation or consultation during the application process actually took place with the people of Addison. There are a few things within the observations of officers that I think are also worth noting. One is that the council, as a borough council, is under a statutory duty to ensure that the character and appearance of the conservation area is preserved and enhanced. There is absolutely no way we can assess whether this application enhances the conservation area of Addison, because we have absolutely no detail on the design or on an awful lot of the design and structure. Another thing that concerns me within this report is that, and Jeff Brown mentioned that we can't consider other alternatives, but what we can do is apply the sequential test to ensure that we don't have an over intensification of buildings that are not used within the town centre. And I can't see any evidence either within the report, online, or as appendices to this application or report, that we have seen the applicants fully consider alternative sites within the town. And applying that sequential test, I'm not clear what alternatives we've seen. There's a section of the report that says in 2006 there was some work carried out. That was 14 years ago. And then again, that in 2017, when the town council had to leave the mortuary building, there was some discussion between 2017 and 2019 around rented accommodation, which is very different to having a proper look at what alternative sites are available within Addison. And it also, finally, I'll draw a point that I think the board should be clear on, is that we're told the usage of the current site, that is usage as an office, has been here since 2003, and that the principle, therefore, is accepted that is a fair usage for the site. The usage or the intensification of usage, I don't think is considered appropriately within this report. What we have at the moment is a single-storey building. This is doubling it in size in terms of internal layout. And for the last 3 years, I understand public meetings have not taken place there. And if we are told that the town council is seeking to secure funding for this from grants by making the building publicly accessible, then that would be a very different use and would have very different parking implications for this site than is contained within the report. So I have a lot of concerns about this application. I'm interested to hear what the members have to think.
Thank you, Councillor Farrell. We've got next Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just really like to echo what Adam said and the previous speaker. I've got serious concerns that we can consider a building that's looking at DDA compliance in retrospect. I just find that astonishing that we're willing to do that. Look at DDA compliance afterwards as an afterthought almost. I really, as I say, I have to repeat, I find it astonishing. If we're trying to be inclusive for groups, community groups, they're going to expect that we've looked at that from the start, really. A lift in a building that size would take up a considerable amount of floor space, but it's already quite tiny when you look at the plans, and then it's got to get to the first floor, which is going to take more floor space away from any potential room upstairs. If we're then going to go on to expect community groups and other people to try and actually book this and monetise our opportunities as a council, which I think we should be considering with our own buildings, where we can try and monetise some opportunities, I just don't think that this building is fit for the purpose or fit for the future. It just lacks all of the size and ability to fulfil that need. I think it's something that other members should take a look at and consider why we're actually got to this stage with those facts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Mawson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I again agree with everything that's been said. Matter of fact, it's made my mind up even more since it's been said when it's come to base. But I'm really surprised, really, in all the years I've been on the planning board, that we've actually gone against what the Highway Authority has said. We've always used the Highway Authority for our own use and other uses. And I'm moving that we move refusal on grounds of Highway Authority.
Thank you, Councillor Mawson. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to echo what everyone else has said. I mean, I'm really concerned with this. I mean, like many of us, have been on this board a long time and visited it many times. And I've sat through many meetings where we've agonised over the different shades of brick and the different courses of windows and in the conservation zone. And it was said to be putting forward a plan that's really not, with a building that's really not fit for purpose. I think that all the arguments that have been said, especially about the DDA, are valid. I mean, I can't see how we can build a office or a civic building without proper access for invalid use. I mean, it's okay putting in a stair lift, but a stair lift only works for people who have trouble getting upstairs, not for people who can't walk, not for people who need some sort of either a wheelchair or a scooter of sorts. And yeah, I just can't see. I certainly can't support this. And I, like Councillor Mawson, I think we should give proper weight to the Highways Authority, and I'll second Councillor Mawson's proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Mr. Brown, is there anything you'd like to add?
Just one point, Mr. Chairman. As a point I made in introducing this, building regulations is different to planning permission. The applications we've just had previously on the agenda, they have been detailed plans there of the internal layouts of developments, but no one has mentioned the DDA issues with those particular sites. If planning permission is granted, the applicant here will also have to gain a consent under the building regulations. The building regulations will look at the DDA arrangements, which is what happens with all the other permissions and applications that we get through. Should that require variation, then obviously the applicant will have to come back to vary the planning application, which is normal procedure. The fact that these are two parallel systems of legislation is familiar to all members. That should remain to be the case.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm finding this a really difficult one to weigh up because I haven't heard anything for it yet, in favour of it, and I'm coming to this new. And I must say that I do share the concerns. As far as the design is concerned, at the very least, we need a condition where the design champions can work on this and make sure that it's consistent with the conservation area. I am really concerned about the DDA, even given what Mr. Brown's just said, which I do accept, but that links to parking. I understand that at the moment the existing building operates without parking, but if you're going to be fully DDA compliant, you've got to have at least some disabled parking available for those people that cannot walk far from the car parks. So I am finding this quite difficult to support, to be honest with you. I would have liked to have heard people in favour of it that could have given me the other side. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Farrell?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on a couple of other points because I spent some time today reading the core strategy, the adopted core strategy of North Warwickshire Borough Council, and it made me think even more as to why this application has been recommended for approval, not only given the fact that the Highways Authority have registered an objection, and I think given even in my 5 years on this council, I've only known us on 1 or 2 occasions approve something against a Highways recommendation, and often there's a very good reason for it, which I can't find here. But policy NW10 of the core strategy says that development should, and there's a number of things that it should be, but one of them is to be adaptable for future uses and takes into account the needs for all users. I find it very difficult to see how this building, even if we accept that it is suitable for the use proposed, how it would be sustainable and adaptable for future uses. 1, because of the lack of parking, but 2, because of the layout, the design, and the lack of outdoor space that has been made available. And even now, I don't think it takes into account the needs of all users. Yes, it has a downstairs toilet in its layout, but there are no facilities if you are in a wheelchair and unable to walk to be able to access kitchen facilities or to be able to make a cup of tea if this is going to be a publicly available building, a building that people will go to see democracy in action. In our policy again, it says that development should include the provision of bike facilities so that sustainable forms of transport are promoted and encouraged. There is no facilities here, and of course the design does not allow for it because it completely builds out on the footprint of the site. Number 6 in that policy says that it should provide for proper vehicular access, sufficient parking and manoeuvring. Highways have objected to this. I can't see why we should be in favour of it. It goes on to say that new development should protect and enhance the historic environment. I'm not sure how we've met that threshold, but it also says that it should manage the impacts of climate change. And given the importance of that to this council, having declared a climate emergency, this application doesn't talk at all about climate change and the positive impact that this site and the development of this site could have on the reduction of energy usage, on the potential for sustainable forms of energy. It doesn't talk about any of that. So I really struggle with how we have got to a point of suggesting this application should be approved when the detail is lacking and there are more questions than answers.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Members, I'd just like to make a couple of general points here. The first of which is one of the first messages I was given when I joined the planning board is that you need to determine the application which is in front of you as opposed to the application you'd like to have. Now, the officers have provided a full report on this issue and come to a conclusion. An item within that is clearly relating to disabled access. And there is, I think, condition number, so I'm just trying to find it. Condition number 5, which specifically refers to the disabled access provision. So that issue has been addressed within the recommendation in front of you. The officer's report has also talked in detail about the other issues that have been raised this evening. Highways is certainly a concern that is properly raised, but as I'm sure you're all aware, within the town centre, we have very limited opportunity to require additional parking, especially where the building that is proposed is in a no worse position to the building that is there now. So I'd ask you all to just to bear in mind the reality that this is a replacement building within the town centre confines, and our ability to require additional car parking is extremely limited, especially where there is no increase in intensity of use. I've heard a proposal that the consent is refused, and that's been seconded. If we go through that issue, then we'll need to get back to whether it's accepted or not, the fallback position. So to give us both options in terms of a vote, I'll propose planning consent is granted as printed in the programme. Is there a seconder for that?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So we have two proposals, one that planning permission is refused for the reasons I highlighted and outlined by Councillor Howell, and one that planning consent is granted. I heard Councillor Howell's proposal first, so we'll take that in as the first vote.
Sorry, Chair.
I'm sorry.
I think there was a proposal from Councillor Mawson that it be refused on highways grounds. I'm withholding my ability to make another proposal on refusal on other grounds.
My apologies. If you're quite right. So I've got a bit of a migraine at the minute, so I'm getting confused as to where we are. So we have a proposal that's for refusal, one that's for granting. Did you say you had a further proposal, Councillor Fowle?
I may do. I think understanding orders, I can make that at any point before planning permission is granted. Depending on what happens with highways, I may wish to make another proposal on policies related to the core strategy. Unless I've got that wrong.
It was certainly something I've never heard before. What I would encourage you to do, that if there is a valid reason for refusal, that you add it to Councillor Mawson's proposal. And any application that we refuse, we should have a clear list of what the reasons for objection are. I don't think it's in keeping with the spirit of being fair to the applicant to offer additional reasons for refusal once we've already refused permission. Mr. Maxey, could you give us some guidance?
So I don't think seeking a refusal on a different ground is prevented, but I do agree with you, Councillor Simpson, that given that if this is refused, the council may need to defend this on appeal and couldn't then introduce additional grounds, it would be better if all the reasons for refusal were set out in the one vote. We can do it in two ways. It presents some difficulties if we do.
So, Councillor Powell, would you like to make an additional comment now, or wait and see how the vote goes?
Yeah, I'm not proposing that we add. I'm sorry.
Okay, so
what I was going to do was I might
proposition was to, not only on highway grounds, to refuse it on NW10, NW12 and NW18.
So I'm just writing all that down. So the reasons for refusal are highways, as outlined in the report, NW10, NW18 and NW12. Is that right, Councillor Mawson?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. And that's seconded by Councillor Phillips. So,
Yep, I seconded, sorry.
Sorry, my screen's gone completely back, so I'm struggling to see who's talking. So, Councillor Bell, you wish to speak?
Yes, please, Chairman. I don't know whether this is the appropriate point, but when I was speaking about getting the group to look at the design, I was hoping that condition could be included if there was a proposal to approve. So I wondered if that was included in your proposal.
I'm more than happy to go with that, Councillor Bell. I have to say, you as design champion, I have looked at it already. I don't know if Councillor Phillips, you've looked at it, but I've certainly already seen it.
I have, Chair. Yes.
Thank you. So, Councillor Bell, I think that's already been addressed. So, we have a proposal for refusal on the grounds of policies NW10, NW12, NW18 and the highways issues. Can I see those in favour of refusal, please, if no one else wishes to speak?
I'll go through the list. Yeah. So this is for refusal, if that makes sense. Councillor Bell.
Against.
Councillor Deakin.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Hayfield.
Against.
Councillor Humphreys.
Against.
Councillor Lees.
Against.
Councillor MacDonald.
Against.
Councillor Mawson.
For.
Councillor Moss.
I'm going to abstain, Chairman.
Ooh.
Councillor Osborne.
For.
Councillor Parsons.
For.
Councillor Hayden Phillips.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
Against.
That's 6-all, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Maxey. In those circumstances, the chairman has a casting vote, and I vote in line with my previous vote against. As members, I'm sure, are aware, it's not a requirement for me to give particular reasons why I cast my casting vote one way or the other, but I have ordinarily done so. And my reasons on this occasion are that the disability issues will be dealt with by condition, and that I consider that the officer's report fully details answers to the other questions that have been raised. As that motion has fallen, we now move to the alternative proposal, which is to grant consent as outlined in the report. Mr. Maxey, could you run the vote again, please?
I know that Councillor Farrell has his hand up, whether you want to take that.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Farrell. My apologies. You'd like to speak?
Chair, on two issues. The first is a point of order on comments that you made from the chair before this vote, which included that there is no intensification of this site. I think you should have made clear at that point that you were speaking as a member of the planning board and not as chair of this committee, because that is up for debate within the article, within the board report, and is not actually a matter of fact. And I think it was very unhelpful to question members' ability to judge whether the report is of a view that they agree with or not. That is the whole point of the planning board. And the second point of order is around whether it is acceptable to make another motion or proposal now for deferral for a site visit.
As regards to your first point, Councillor Fowle, my comment was what it was, but it was what I was intending to say was that there was no intensification of highway use. If members disagree, then they're perfectly able and willing to make their minds up on that. In terms of your alternative proposal, or second proposal, to go for a deferment for a site visit, I'm happy to take that as a further recommendation. Do you have a seconder for that second recommendation?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Members, I know this is unusual, but if you bear with me, I'll take the recommendation for deferment for a site visit now rather than a vote on the substantial issue.
Sorry,
Councillor
Can I
Fowle?
speak to that proposal?
Yes.
Thank you. Given how close the vote just was, and the potential issues that are raised in this report and the concerns that members have expressed, I do think it would be worth members having, given that there's no rush on this, that building work is not going to start tomorrow, this project doesn't fail if there is a short delay until the next virtual planning board, which could be called in just a matter of weeks' time. There are serious questions here that could have perfectly reasonable answers around DDA compliance, around highways, around the previous work that's been done on the sequential test. There could be a way of getting this through with support from across the board. But the only way to do that is for members to go and visit this site themselves. I don't imagine that many members have ever paid much attention to this site. I certainly hadn't before this application. There was nothing particularly interesting about the building as it is. So I think members should support a site visit. This project doesn't fail if we have a short delay to get some more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foss. That's been proposed and seconded now that we defer for a site visit. Mr. Maxson.
Thank you. So this is in favour of a deferral. Councillor Bell.
Against.
Councillor Deakin.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Hayfield.
Against.
Councillor Humphreys.
Against.
Councillor Lees.
Against.
Councillor MacDonald.
Against.
Councillor Mawson.
For.
Councillor Moss.
For.
Councillor Osborne.
For.
Councillor Parsons.
For.
Councillor Phillips.
For.
And Councillor Simpson.
Against. By my maths, that's one vote in favour of deferral.
That's right.
So, members, that issue is now deferred until the next meeting of the board. Mr. Brown, could you make the necessary arrangements for a site visit, please? Members, I think that takes us to the end of this evening's agenda. I'd just like to thank you all for your attendance. And just to let you know that there are two ladies here who've been working extremely hard to keep the Jeff Brown show on the road. Thank you both very much indeed. It's your help and assistance, I'm sure, has been invaluable. Members, thank you very much indeed. I was going to say have a safe journey home. It's time to go to the virtual chip shop, but do enjoy what you can of the rest of the evening.